Welcome everyone to tonight's program here at Showcase Theater. My name is Barbara McVeigh and I am so happy to serve as your host tonight. We take this opportunity to acknowledge and reflect on the work and values of a leader who put the good of the nation above his own political self-interest. President Jimmy Carter, who turned 93 years old yesterday. We're really incredibly grateful to present this program to you, which is a part of a week-long tribute to honor President Jimmy Carter, our 39th president. And the efforts became really a passion project by a small group of incredibly dedicated people that resulted in the support of many, which you will soon see. You know, it's amazing. It was only 5 years ago when I began to understand Carter's vision and policies of the 1970s. I was producing an ocean advocacy film with oceanographer Dr. Sylvia Earle. Some of you may know. She's an 80-year-old woman who's been researching and diving most of her entire life. And I came face to face with hard truths about our warming oceans and the carbon that's causing much of our problems today, recognizing the grave danger that not only our country but our entire planet is facing. The film you're about to see, A Road Not Taken, explores history that we need to talk about in order to help us understand the hard road that we have ahead of us, and we hope to glean some lessons from the past as we face an enormous challenge. We are so lucky tonight to have the filmmakers Christina Haymauer and Roman Keller with us. They flew in from Switzerland and arrived on Saturday specifically for this event with us tonight. There are also a couple of other people. Well, of course, Michael Stalker, he is Executive Director of Ocean Conservation Research. I like to call him as a local hero. He's with us, and he'll be on the panel after the film. And over the weekend, we learned, and we're very excited to learn, that Tom Stromolo is here with us tonight. Tom, He was in the Carter administration and was involved with the solar panels, which we'll talk about and see tonight, so it's pretty exciting to have him here with us. So a couple of instructions. You all have an index card and pen to write questions for the panelists following the film. So if you could please pass your cards, either right or left, to the ushers after the film with your questions. We'll collect those and use those questions to address the panelists after the film, of course, and we'll address as many questions as we can. Also, after the formal session here, you can continue speaking with Christina and Roman and Michael in the lobby, and what's really fun is we're putting together a video for President Carter of all the week's events, and including tonight, we'll have a video camera outside, and if you would like to give him a personal greeting and a happy birthday wish, you may. How fun is that, right? And isn't it wonderful to do this while he's still alive? Right? A huge thank you to our sponsors, College of Marin, Community Media Center of Marin, and Marin Artists Network, along with the Democratic Central Committee of Marin and associated students of College of Marin for supporting this event tonight. And also a huge thank you to Congressman Jared Huffman, Assembly Member Mark Levine, California State Senator Mike McGuire, the City Council of Nevada, the Democratic Central Committee of Marin, and Marin's Board of Supervisors, with special recognition to Kate Sears. Please enjoy the film, A Road Not Taken. We, again, are so grateful to have this great group of panelists with us tonight. As I mentioned earlier, filmmakers Christina Haymauer and Roman Keller flew from their home country of Switzerland to join us specifically for tonight and share their story about making this film, which was released in 2010, right? And it's been to many film festivals in Europe, United States, and it was aired on television in Japan and several countries in Europe. And they are still searching for an American distributor. So welcome, Christina and Roman. Michael Stalker is the Executive Director of Ocean Conservation Research, which is actually a local organization, Santa Fe. Michael has committed himself to ocean conservation for, I think it's been about 15 years. He's been traveling to Washington to lobby on behalf of marine wildlife. Additionally, he's written several articles and presented lectures throughout America and Western Europe and on the topics of bioacoustics, sound in the ocean, and the effect of man-made noise in that environment. He's the author of Here Where We Are, Here Where We Are, Here Where We Are. And his book is actually out in the lobby as well as the film that you've seen tonight. So welcome, Michael. Oh, that's nicer. So I'm going to start off the questions. To you, Christina and Roman. This film project began as an art installation, and then moved into a film project on an extremely tight budget. Can you tell us what brought you to this project and how this project grew into a film?
Good evening. So actually, we're visual artists, as Barbara told you before, and during some research for a manifesto we wanted to, or we heralded in 2006, we came across the fact that there once has been a solar installation on the White House, which was very astonishing for us, but great news. And the manifesto we were writing on and was heralded was about a new chapter in art history, the so-called post-petralism. So we wanted to step over this era of not knowing how long we will have oil. So for us it already rounded out, and we tried to figure out how it must feel without oil. So the second astonishing thing was that we found out that these panels were really physical, still available at the Unity College, as you learned in the movie. And this was, I don't know, it was very fast, but we came up with this idea that we want to take them on a travel and down the road they took up, but also down the road of history, and we wanted to, alongside, interview people that were or have been involved with it. For example, Tom Sturmelo and the other installers. Yeah, does it answer the question? It's not finished yet.
It's not finished there, because we had this single exhibition in the museum where we showed a two-channel video installation, and we remade part of the roof of the White House and had an actor reenacting the speech, and we just changed in the year 2000 to 20 years from now. And it of course was astonishing because it was so contemporary 30 years later. And we invited Jimmy Carter for the opening. He couldn't come, but he wrote us an email at the very morning of that opening and invited us for an interview. And we knew by the time that was really special. He doesn't do it normally. And that was actually the reason we started to make this documentary. So it took us some time, but it was nice experience.
Christina had shared that story with me earlier and said, and you said it in a very passionate way, that once you got that interview, you knew you had to share this story, that you couldn't keep it to yourself. That was inspiring to me.
Yeah, it felt like an obligation to bring it to a broader audience, and that's why we really wanted to do this documentary, not to keep it in the small art life, some kind of. And it was a gift of Carter, and as Roman told you, Al Gore, when he worked on The Inconvenient Truth, he asked Carter for an interview, and he didn't become one, so it was really something special.
Michael, what happened? We were on a great track there. Is it true that how much about global climate change did we know in that time, and what kind of information can we gain from the film today, do you think?
I guess first I'd like to thank you, Barbara, for pulling this together, and Christina from the College of Marin, and all the other people who put all the energy into this. I feel honored to be up here amongst these really august people who have taken this challenge of jumping off the deep end and not sure exactly how far you're going to fall. And I'm glad you're here. But Barbara originally asked if I would be interested in interviewing on the panel, and I felt really honored. There's a side of this too, although there's a lot of people here who remember Jimmy Carter and probably were voting at that time he was around, I feel that somehow I managed to get up here as a product of me being old enough to remember that, and it's a little bit, I have to think about this a little bit, but I'm a marine bioacoustician. I work in the ocean, but we continue to have this problem with fossil fuel being the driver of our economy at this point in time. What happened, America was in a very sad place at the time Jimmy Carter was elected to be the president. We had been betrayed again through Watergate. Spiro Agnew had set up the idea that this party that was ruling the country was dishonest. It was really ossified or kind of blown up by Watergate. And so the Republican Party didn't really have a moral high ground or a moral authority to be able to accept what was coming down the pike as the next thing we needed to do. Albeit, Richard Nixon was really the last of our serious environmental presidents in terms of congressional action, legal action. We had the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, Environmental Protection Agency, National Environmental Policy Act. I mean, all these acts which really set the stage for how we needed to deal with corporatism and corporate impact on our society was really set up at that point in time, but nothing was implemented, or very little was implemented. There were agencies that were put together, but the Environmental Policy Act, when it came out of Congress and was signed into law by President, it was, by President Nixon, it was, maybe a 10-page document at best. And what happens when that occurs is they set up the agency was working all the details out. But it was just in its infancy when Jimmy Carter came into play there. There were a lot of challenging forces. Of course, the fossil fuel, a lot of us were pretty convinced that the OPEC was driving the prices of oil up by creating scarcity. We were having to come to terms with that. We might also remember, some of us, that the interest rates, the prime rate during Jimmy Carter reached 21%. So when we're talking about prime rate now being 1.5% or something like that, I mean, in terms of what drove economies. But at that time, also, we were still a nation that considered ourselves a body of ideas we were heroes of our own kind of our own momentum. That again had been sullied by the Vietnam War. By the time we had pulled out of that, that was a failure. I mean, our exit plan was really ugly. And everybody knew, or most people knew by that time, that we had been duped. So we were at a really moral nadir in our country. To give you an idea of that, Jimmy Carter in the primary was running against George Wallace. For those of you who were around at that time, George Wallace was the last of the racist white Southern Democrats. It was kind of after the Civil Rights Act when, as President Johnson said, the Democrats had lost the South. Well, he was the last of the Southern Democrats who was really racist. And he picked up about 25 or 30% of the vote in the primary. But in a sense, Jimmy Carter rose to the surface because the Republican Party had no moral authority at that point in time. They were running Gerald Ford, who a lot of people felt was essentially a football player, posing as a president, or posing as a presidential candidate, and Ronald Reagan, who still people were kind of dubious about this idea of an actor becoming a president who had no essentially pedigree, political pedigree. So Jimmy Carter came at this nexus of kind of the moral nadir of America, and the necessity for leadership was something that he, I guess I could say, I don't want to say that he was not a leader per se, but he was a civil servant. And the speech that he was giving on, you know, the crisis of confidence, he speaks about those people who pulled together Camp David, saying that we need a leader right now. We don't need this sense of we're all in this pool together. That speech did not necessarily generate the idea of leadership with Jimmy Carter. So it was a very interesting nexus in kind of a crossover in the American moral context, but also, as he mentioned, we were kind of losing our idea of a commons. And he spoke about it in my speech, where essentially, you know, the path of a common purpose was being kind of subverted into the idea of a common economy. We were moving from being citizens living in society to consumers living in an economy. And it was an incredible nexus, and the election that happened after that, Ronald Reagan was able to help guide us out of that with his warm and fuzzy palaver. So he was in a challenging place. And just one more thing, I don't want to yammer on too much, but I had a friend who was working with Jimmy Carter during that election, and really pretty closely. And when Carter was elected, there was a surprise there. And at that time, there weren't a lot of think tanks around. It was the Rand Corporation, was kind of the main international policy think tank. And it was in West LA, Santa Monica at the time. Jimmy Carter went there and spent 10 days in retreat with those people. What my friend Taylor said is when he came out, he looked 10 years older. So they basically read the tea leaves about what was going on in the world. And so he was heroic in his ability to be able to drive truthfully what we were facing without necessarily revealing what was essentially the hidden hand of the federal government.
And Jimmy Carter said in that 1979 Crisis of Confidence speech that people are beginning to judge others by how much they have rather than how much they do for others. And there was clearly a pivotal cultural switch at that time. It's interesting because I remember my grandfather and uncles, who were both big Reagan advocates and had fought in World War II and were alarmed by the state of the country. And they had really wanted the country to be put back together again. Yeah, I think they'd be seeing things differently today. I have a question, audience has a question for Christina and Roman. Can you guys talk about the panels at Unity College? Were they functioning panels? They look like they were in the film. Are they still functioning?
Half of them were on this cafeteria roof, not working really well, and the other was the other half was in that shed where they lost the key. So you see both parts in the movie: the ones collecting dust and the ones on the roof.
Yeah. It was a former Quaker house, so this one building.
Interesting to note there, at that same time, there were 17,000 windmills established in the state of California under Governor Brown. So a lot of other efforts had been made for sustainable energy. Okay, another question from the audience. Michael, I think this one is for you. What was the reason that Reagan took the solar panels down?
Well, it was a publicity stunt, of course. A lot of the things that we were being asked by Carter to do was in the context of a responsibility to our society. A friend of mine who's actually in the audience, Mary Majori, mentioned to me or reminded me that we had this idea of flex time back during the Carter years, where instead of everybody getting on the freeway and getting to work at 8 o'clock, you could choose and basically spread out our use of the freeway, so we didn't have people sitting in traffic jams. We had a choice, but it was a responsible choice that we're making on behalf of the entire nation. And we were brought into this idea of the commons. What happens when a president sees, if you have an opportunity to listen to the Crisis of Confidence speech, there's a section in there where he's basically indicting the fossil fuel industry, surprisingly not the coal industry, but the oil and gas industry, and it was his death knell. Because industry in the United States was now all of a sudden being subjected to all sorts of regulations under EPA, Endangered Species Act, they were livid, and they had lost control of the ship of state, and they needed to pick that up some. And whether it was the hostage crisis, surprisingly, if you're around to remember that, literally within minutes after Ronald Reagan was inaugurated, they released the hostages. So it's pretty clear there was some correlation. You mentioned it in this movie in terms of everything being erased before that, but that turning point was pretty clear to a lot of us that, there's actually a correlation between these particular incidents that are happening. So the fossil fuel industry is really, now we've got basically a fossil fuel coup that's gone on, but they have been working for decades to try to unharness themselves from their responsibility to the public commons. And this is, I think, where Reagan took us when he symbolically took they were heating with wood in the White House as well. And so they basically got us back onto fossil fuel by symbolic solar.
Well, I think we shouldn't forget the administration just reduced the budget on research and development by 90%. So it was not the only act.
But even earlier, it was already shortly after, or the first year after Reagan was in office.
He reduced the funding for renewable or non-fossil fuel energy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he introduced research fundings and closed. In this way, closed.
We also had the development of the wind farms out in Livermore. There were thousands of those put up, and Ronald Reagan did an interesting thing called the Research and Development Limited Partnership Act, where he was able to encourage American technical ingenuity by a tax law. And some of that went into the wind generators out there, but a lot of it also kind of went into a lot of other technologies like nuclear technology that it wasn't, I guess it was an effort that because I benefited from that. I was involved in a funding program for an energy-oriented program. So we got some funding there was a tax benefit there, but there was a lot of legerdemain, kind of shenanigans going on with tax law at the time to basically encourage large corporate advances in technology and consolidate power, particularly energy.
Okay, great. Christina and Roman, in talking to a lot of people today, and even the youth, about Jimmy Carter, there's very, very little known about him. If you get out, try this experiment, start asking people, and the younger people, who is Jimmy Carter? And you'd be surprised how many people don't even know who he is. It was astounding, preparing for this event. And he was also kind of joked about. People used to make fun of him, Peanut Man and this sort of thing. And that's how I had learned about him. What was your impression when you interviewed him? What did you come away with, and how do you, in Europe, if you can answer that, perceive Jimmy Carter?
It's not difficult to answer, but who is going to give the answer? I mean, he's a really elegant, intellectual person who, I think, he knows to deal either the situation and the people he addresses. What's he? For the interviews, and he's also elegant in the way he welcomes you and the way he disappears afterwards, because he knows there is never enough time to have all the questions that you think he should answer, and it was on a personal level and then political level. It was very impressive.
Well, to the second part of the questions, I was too young to remember Jimmy Carter, and also a lot of people in Europe don't have. It depends on the age, of course, and I would say Europeans are a little bit more attracted to democratic presidents, so they would. I think he's not so much a loser in Europe than in the United States. So he has not that. There's not this bad, remembrance of him. Just.
I guess we should be reminded that he did win a Nobel Peace Prize and other humanitarian awards and many other things. A question from our audience. Did it say at the end of the film that new solar panels were going to be installed at the White House? And did that happen, and are they still there?
Yes. During Obama administration, well, to be honest, there was also some solar panels installed in the garden on the Pony House during the Bush administration. That was also, nobody was mentioning it. It was, Is it too close?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Roman.
Okay. Those solar panels were planned during the Clinton-Gore administration. And then during Obama administration, there was a new set on the main building of the White House. As far as we know, they're still there. But even, imagine even Barack Obama didn't do a big deal out of it. There was nearly no media coverage about that, and that's something you can obviously control as a president. Well, even he didn't like to invite Jimmy Carter to have to honor him on the roof of the White House, which would be possible, of course.
Yeah, one of the other curious things that I've learned through this experience is how few environmental leaders actually recognize President Jimmy Carter and his efforts. And I'm curious about that. Michael, do you have any ideas why we don't hear more about his efforts? And What's going on?
Systematically speaking, I mean, there was a lot of effort to basically deprecate Jimmy Carter as the Peanut Man. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened. The peace agreement, although that was thwarted shortly afterwards, Sadat was assassinated. The Department of Energy, I mean, what an amazing phenomena, which is now being headed by an oil billionaire. So, you know, there was, but it was a mushy time. I mean, the hostage crisis was hideous. I mean, it was one of those things. It was probably one of the last active press events to try to, you know, drive a policy point home. 444 days, and every day they would say, this is 429 days. And, you know, every day it was up in your face, like the Vietnam War was before for the American people through the Nixon years and the Johnson years, that the press actually took responsibility for some kind of policy action. What ended up happening with Jimmy Carter, unfortunately, was they managed to essentially fetter him, that his dynamics, his honesty, those things were not. I mean, we spent a lot more time on Billy Carter and Billy Beer than on Jimmy Carter and some of his policies. Some of you remember.
Yeah. I was listening to a Leonardo DiCaprio interview just the other day. I mean, he's taken a big lead in all of this, and he said that, you know, around the world, they see climate change issues as real as gravity. It's here, and we're dealing with it. And so Christina and Roman, just going back to you, what are you guys? And I'm going to say this may be a hard question to answer for you. What are you thinking about us at this stage in time? What are the perceptions in Switzerland? I mean, I really want to be able to see what's going on the outside with you here as the opportunity to hear what are the voices out there. I'm putting them on the spot, aren't I?
Well, obviously the current situation is very unfortunate, we would say. But basically, you know, we're sitting in the same boat. You know, as Europeans, we always were looking. You know, the last 50 years we're looking to the US, and we're like hoping for leadership also, and sometimes there is some hope and sometimes there's less. I would say the Paris account we felt that very strong, or we still feel it very strong, because it was like, you know, people from the environmental side just kind of lost hope that people come together and have an agreement. You know, after Copenhagen, it just took a very long time to get the people together and have an account. So this is something we feel strongly, and I think that's something also European leaders at the moment, you know, will continue with or without the US. And that's something new that people say, oh, come on, we do it on our own. But, you know, the Europeans were not better in implementing energy efficiency much more than the US. It's not, you know, we think it's also not moving far enough.
And not fast enough, and we were, the last 40 years, always a little bit behind. I mean, the American waves, so it's slower.
But bringing up the question you asked a few questions ago about when did we know about this, there was a book that came out in 1970 called Soylent Green. It was a dystopian science fiction book. Some of you remember. I see nodding heads here. The cause of the dystopia at that time was climate change. And that was surprising. It was written in 1970. The first really known, Hansen wrote his paper in 1976. But we knew back in the 50s that particulate matter in the atmosphere was going to influence climate. There's an interesting component of this. John Glenn, who was our first astronaut up in gravity-free space or low-gravity space, wanted to travel up again 30 years later, and there was an argument as to why would you send this guy up who's already been up there before. It turned out to be actually a pretty informative journey, because he came down from that trip and he said when he first went up, before anybody had been up there, that the horizon line was as sharp as a razor. And when he went up 30 years later, it was fuzzy.
Yeah.
That's important. You've increased the albedo and the particulate matter significantly on the planet at that level, which was pretty clear. We're making a difference.
Well, why wasn't that known? Why didn't that come out?
It came out, but there was, the fossil fuel industry has been pretty, and the industry in general, but fossil fuel, anybody who's kicking that particulate matter out there doesn't want us to act on it. And they're spending a lot of money to obfuscate what the actual science is on this.
And certainly no one wants that responsibility of feeling they've contributed to the problem that we have. That would not be a good feeling. Not to mention, of course, it's the big business is just they're dominating, aren't they? They're dominating the media, and really it's up to the people. Before I go onto that track, I do want to mention I was in Costa Rica this past summer, last year, and I actually went there because they have such an aggressive approach to being carbon neutral, I think by 2020. I might have that year wrong, but they're really taking an aggressive approach, and I was really interested in that. And then I also talked to some people there, and one specific person who works in the government asked me about Jimmy Carter, and he said, "Why don't you guys like Jimmy?" And that was another thing that triggered me at that time of, wow, we need to talk about this. Because he's highly respected in Latin American countries. He actually spoke Spanish and delivered his speeches in Spanish. And on that note, I just wanted to recognize that somebody did come in, the Consul General of Guatemala, who is just sneaking out. I got you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming, Patricia Lavanino, and the Vice Consul for coming to this evening's show. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sorry?
We have travel back to Alameda, so we apologize. So thank you, and very interesting issue. By the way, I just want to mention something. I attended the General Assembly of the United Nations in '87, and if you look in the library, there is a report this big that came out from the UN about climate change in '87. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, on that note, and part of my own journey, I discovered a book in 1976 by the World Watch Institute. Dennis Hayes was the author about reporting climate change issues, and so there's a lot we can look back on and question, and hope we can learn from our past mistakes and understand the struggles we have going forward. On that note, where are we at right now, Michael, in terms of communities and hope and what people are doing? I know you've been very involved with communities here, and I know there's a very active ocean advocacy organizations here in many right here in Marin County, also the Bay Area.
Well, as we all know, we're facing very dire times right now. And, a lot of whether it's the disaster of the tweet of the week that ends up distracting our press for the next 4 or 5 days, or it's some other disaster that happens, the structures that we've been using to try to drive policy towards sustainability, towards bringing back stressed environments or habitats, fisheries or what have you, are all now being systematically eviscerated from inside. Mr. Pruitt, who was the head of EPA, who spent his lifetime trying to eviscerate the EPA from the outside, has now got an office space, and the entire floor of the EPA that his office is on is shut down. There's 800 offices in that building, and he shut down the entire floor, and he sequestered the visitors log. So my suspicions are he has a bunch of oilmen who are in there taking the law apart, the Environmental Protection Act apart, not in a way that would, require public review. Because you're going to take the act apart, you have to have a public review period. What they're doing is they're taking all the little stuff inside the infrastructure that essentially supports a workable policy and has, these people who are basically obstructionists to, so we're in a dire time right now. What happened in 1968, 69, 70, 71 with the burning of the Cuyahoga River, the Stringfellow acid pits, the Santa Barbara oil spill, the Love Canal. I mean, all these things kind of teamed up, and the public finally said, no, what is good for corporations is not good for America. But it was very devastating, and I'm basically fearing that we're going to have to hit that same kind of wall for people to shore these guys up again. And it will happen, but what is it going to take to restructure or shore up those institutions, those policies, those practices to allow us to drive ahead without completely unbridled corporate greed? I'm not sure. I'm not a policy wonk at that level. I'm just looking at it from essentially what's happening with the laws, the rules, and legislation and practices that I'm trying to impact.
So yesterday, Roman, Christina, and I, Christina from College of Marin, were out in Tiburon watching an airplane make a big heart in the sky, and it just happened to be right next to the sun. And I like to think that was a very symbolic symbol of hope, that it's not all doom and gloom, because there's something that's very powerful happening right now, and that is we're still alive, right? And I just wonder if it's time to bow down to humility. Dr. Sylvia Earle actually says, know your place in the universe. And what do you, maybe throw this out to all of you, what would you say as your words of hope to us? From making the film to being here, traveling here, I think that's actually a great symbol of hope as well, of just the integrity and the energy and the sense of purpose that you guys, Christina and Roman, did just to get here to share an important story. To me, that's inspiring.
I may make a joke. The planet will survive us. So
The planet will survive us. Yes, yes. Roman, any parting words?
Sometimes I think, in a way we know how this is going to end, We're probably someone will have international agreements how we deal with global climate change. We're going to make sure that we share more with poorer people, because we need to have this to solve other problems or solve the climate problem. The question is just how we come there and how fast we are, and the problem is how this is going to be happening. But I think the end, in the end, it's clear what's going to be there after this crisis.
Yeah, life is resilient. One of the things that we're seeing recently is we're seeing harbor porpoises in San Francisco Harbor. We're seeing now feeding humpback whales in the harbor. When I was a kid, a lot of the San Francisco Bay smelled like a sewer. It was just a dumping ground. And to know that life is reestablishing itself, the herring and the anchovies are coming back, the eelgrass beds are expanding, the oysters are starting to come back. So life is resilient if we give it a chance. And it doesn't take that long once we back off the throttle a little bit. So we will get to a point where there's going to be a threshold of policy that will allow us to back the throttle and watch life regenerate. It's not just a message of hope. It's what's going to be happening in the next 10 years is going to make a difference to what's going to be around for the next 10,000 years. But in 10 million years, there's going to be complex vertebrates on the planet, and it's going to look gorgeous. That's over.
Yeah, Michael and I were talking not long ago about running nonprofits, and what is it? 60% of your time you're out with your tin cup, just asking for money so you can do work that's good for all of us. And maybe we're getting on that track now where we're beginning to value people for what they do for all of us, right? There's hope. The other sense of hope is, hey, we are in Marin County, and this is a hotbed for so many activists and organizations and leaders. In fact, tomorrow, right here at Showcase Theater, there is going to be a program generated by Paul Hawken, who wrote a book called Showdown. And so that, I think it's sold, what is it? Drawdown. Thank you. Showdown. Yeah. Okay. Drawdown with an incredible book that I saw. I haven't been able to read it yet because it's pretty thick. But I think it's a sold-out event tomorrow here. That's good news, isn't it? People are getting active and they want to know what they can do. And there's so many other things that are happening here in Marin County. And then also Resilient Neighborhoods. I don't know if you've heard about them. That's another great organization where you can learn about your carbon footprint and how to reduce that on an individual level. And I'd like to see that people are really connecting on a higher level with this. We're going to do it, right? We're going to do it. And you're here tonight. That's fantastic. I think we need to wrap this up. I just really want to thank you all for coming here tonight. This is really fantastic. You can also go out into the lobby where we'll have a birthday greeting on video where you can say a few words to Jimmy Carter if you'd like. We're creating that video to send to him at the end of the week here. And also to make note that on Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Community Media Center of Marin, which is on 8th Street in San Rafael, we're going to have a mixer, and Christina and Roman, you're coming, I hope, and other people will be there, and it'll be a great way just to talk about Jimmy Carter, have some birthday cake, and learn about what we can do as a community. And I think with that, I think it's just happy birthday, Jimmy Carter, right? And just last words, just a huge, huge thank you again to the sponsors, College of Marin, Community Media Center, and Marin Artists Network, and along with the Democratic Central Committee of Marin and associated students of College of Marin for supporting all these efforts. Thank you.